All right, so this video is about inflation and what is inflation, and these are the topics we're going to go over. Try to go over all the aspects of inflation, and starting with a little history. So really, when it comes to inflation, on the surface or the symptom of inflation is when you see prices going up. And this chart is of Campbell's tomato soup. This is a very accurate chart to measure inflation. It's one of my favorite charts. And the price of this was able to be tracked via newspaper clippings back almost 150 years. And you can see the symptom of inflation on display here. That's just the here on this axis is the US dollar, and on this axis is time. And you can see that over time, the price of a can of tomato soup has gone up. And that is the symptom of inflation. And also with inflation, there's the purchasing power and the prices are inversely related. So as the prices of items go up in terms of US dollars, for example, the purchasing power of a US dollar is also going down. And it's kind of hard to see here. So an example, in 1933, $1 bought you essentially 10 beers. Whereas today, $1, you'll be lucky if that buys you, a small coffee at a gas station. And so we're going to dig a little bit into the root cause of, why the dollar prices in dollars goes up and what causes inflation. We'll go back to our Monopoly example. And, here we had two variables. We had the quantity of money in the game, and we had the supply of houses or homes. And, we covered this. We knew that if the amount of money increases, if you're looking at US dollars, the amount of US dollars, or the quantity of US dollars available increases, the value of each dollar goes down. You need to spend more of those dollars to get what you want. Then this drives the prices in terms of US dollars, the prices are going to go higher. Well, let's take this analogy, one step further. So as we know, also over time, the supply will be changing as well. So, in this case, we know that we expect more houses to be built. People are going to build more houses. And then say, for example, now our supply has doubled. Our money supply has doubled. Well, in this case, there's no price change. These items have reached equilibrium again. So now let's look at this from a graphic point of view in terms of amount of money or quantity of money and the amount of supply. So the amount of money is, this is also known as the M2 money supply. This is a metric that tracks just the amount of, or for US dollars, it tracks the quantity of US dollars around the world. And the amount of supply is also known as productivity, and there are ways to measure productivity and growth of productivity over time. So inflation is when over a long period of time, the quantity of money, or the rate of change, or the rate of increase of the quantity of money, come on in, bud, is larger than the rate increase of the growth in productivity. So that's inflation. And then deflation would be exactly the opposite. And we got a special guest visitor for this video. So here you see the red line, productivity is on top. It's increasing faster than the money supply. I'm making a video, buddy. So to go a step further into the analogy, why does the quantity of money go up? Well, this has to do with one of our last topics about the U.S. Treasury and essentially the U.S. Central Bank, the U.S. Federal Reserve. So the U.S. Treasury will issue U.S. debt. These are T-bills. These are bonds. The Federal Reserve acquires these, for free. They're essentially creating money, and then they issue Federal Reserve notes as liabilities backed by that, which then the member banks use to create even more money. So inflation is a result of, or the quantity of money going up is a result of this 12-member board voting on how much to increase the M2 money supply. And this ties back also to the Keynesian view of economics, which says that expanding the money supply, government intervention to expand the money supply is a key way to stimulate demand and promote growth. And this also down here at the bottom is a useful tidbit to know. And so that's the M2 money supply. And when it comes to productivity, it's not necessarily governments. It's more of individuals, frontline individuals. These are individual entrepreneurs, individual executives within large companies. These are the ones that are driving change, driving adoption of new technology. They're the ones driving the growth of productivity. And so now let's look at the, in terms of inflation, let's look at the metric that's used to cover this, and it's called the Consumer Price Index, which is it is a government organization that keeps track of an average basket of goods that a family is going to buy, and by tracking the price of these individual items, it's a way that it's a proxy of the difference in supply and demand. I will play with you in a second, buddy. I'm right in the middle of a video. And by doing so, it can track both the by tracking only the price, it does account for both the changing of money supply and the changing of productivity. And this video is about Bitcoin. And this graph here shows the CPI over time. So take a closer look at the CPI basket, because there are a number of nuances here to understand. And we're going to get into this in a further section, but there are government incentives to underreport on the CPI. It's a way to decrease or mask the cost of government spending programs or benefit programs. I don't want to sound like a right-wing conspiracy theorist, but these are real perverse incentives or misaligned incentives, and we will cover these in a future video. But there are some examples that you can probably you'll most likely or likely have encountered in everyday life. And here's the most common one is it's called something getting priced out of the CPI basket. So if we have a price of steak, if that increases, then people are just going to stop buying steak because it's too expensive. People are now going to buy chicken because it's cheaper. And after a year or so of this happening, since steak is no longer represented, Grayson, please stop that. Since steak is no longer, since families aren't commonly buying steak anymore, I'm sorry, give me 1 second. Grayson, I'm in the middle of making a video. Please stop making noise. Where was I? Since consumers are no longer buying steak, it's removed from the basket and now it's no longer accounted for. So that's kind of, it is impacting the consumer in terms of changing dietary habits, changing health. So it's not an entirely accurate measurement. And you can actually see a recent example of this. This is from a couple years ago. This got a lot of attention on Twitter, but the Federal Reserve Organization just reminding people that there are cheaper options out there for Thanksgiving than besides, buying, you need to eat soybeans instead of spending money to buy turkey. Soybeans are cheaper. Obviously, it would have much different implications to your health and diet. And then there's another means of that's measured with inflation, and these are called hedonic quality adjustments, and they're very subjective and open to interpretation. So CPI doesn't track the actual value of houses. It uses an owner's equivalent, presumably to streamline and to kind of smooth out that curve. But even if you were to average this out, you can see that this average or this trend is much lower than what the average would be. And then same thing with new vehicles. This is a Ford F-150. Grayson's giving me a Bitcoin sticker. This is a Ford F-150 and a Toyota Camry. These are the prices of them over time. And then the CPI equations, they tend to underreport these and undershow these. So that is, and then there's an organization also that is called Shadow Stats. They try to really analyze all the details and do it in an unbiased fashion and track the true impact of inflation. And you can see here on the bottom is what's been reported by the government or by the government agency, and on top is what Shadow Stats reports as the actual inflation. And there's 5-10% difference, which is not small. And because there's the hidden aspect of inflation and it's kind of disguised, it's known sometimes as the hidden tax. And now back to the tomato soup example. That's why this is such an interesting proxy for inflation. And it seems overly simplified, but it's actually, this can is very accurate proxy, because there's really no ability to fudge or be subjective about what the product is. There's no way to change the product. It's a serving of tomato soup. So just in this one can, it's going to account for our production, our growth of production, our growth of abilities, and our productivity. It's all going to be accounted for because of free market competition. And at the same time, the consumer demand is the other half of the equation. The market's always going to be reaching supply-demand equilibrium at a certain price. So the only variable that you're left with when it comes to tomato soup is the quantity of money. And on this chart here, it shows very accurately, you can see the increase of the quantity of money. This is inflation. You can see it very clearly. And lastly, this is kind of an old chart, but the point is that nearly every currency in the world has annual inflation. The U.S. relative to all the other countries, sometimes the U.S. is called the least dirty shirt, but the U.S. dollar is pretty good relatively. And you see some very high numbers in some countries around the world. And in conclusion, inflation is where the quantity of money over time exceeds the productivity, the amount of products and services in the free market. And this excess of the quantity of money is artificially, or it is not artificially, it is created via central banks and under Keynesian theories of economics.